I've had the itch to pour some concrete lately. I've done it in the past once before, pouring a concrete countertop for a coffee table, and I thought I'd give it another round of attempts. Coffee table was successful, so I want to try some new stuff out, and my idea is to try things out incrementally, because as much as this is a concrete experimentation project, it's also my first foray into woodworking, because I'll be building all of the forms for pouring the concrete, and I've never done that on my own before, and using some new tools. So that'll be exciting. When I say incrementally, I'm thinking there's a few different ways of building forms for pouring the concrete into. And I can think of a simple form, like maybe a countertop, or on a way smaller scale, a coaster, which is just, a depth form you're pouring concrete into, and there's no kind of dimensionality to it. The other side of it is I want to make a flower pot, and there's a couple ways of doing it. One of the things that I want to prioritize is ensuring that I can reuse the molds. I don't know how successful I'll be at that. It is kind of expensive to make these forms, buying the raw materials. It's not, crazy expensive, but it would be nice if I could just reuse the materials time after time, making the same stuff. I do want to focus on small scale stuff. I don't want it to be huge, like from a time investment perspective or from materials perspective, and just want to scale up as I go along and learn more throughout this. Let me draw out what I mean by the different kind of dimensionalities that I'm thinking about, and then we can try to build some of this stuff. Here are my ideas. I'm thinking there's 3 levels of building out some experience here. With level 1, you can see it's really simple. I'm just gonna have 2 pieces of wood along the vertical, and then 1 across the horizontal. Then we're just gonna screw those pieces together. This is a cross section, so double that, and it'll just be a little square. And we'll just pour some concrete into it, and it'll make a coaster. So not thinking too hard about that one, just to get some, initial experience in. I'm thinking for the second part, it's a flower pot cross section. So again, it'll be just like, a pot would be. So this will be 2 forms. Again, everything will just be screwed together. We'll have some top supports. I've been watching some videos of other people do stuff like this, and they usually have to add these in later because concrete at the bottom will start pushing the form up. So just want to be proactive with that. Big idea is to keep it simple, stupid. Get a minimum flower pot made out of this. The big thing that I think will be a problem with this is that I've seen the wood will end up, I think, shrinking or expanding with the concrete, and the concrete itself dries pretty stickily, it feels like, from the videos that I've watched, where the outside form is easily to take off, but the inside form people usually end up having to destroy. So that's kind of where, and I think that's acceptable for this one. We'll see how that works out. For this version, and I don't know if we'll be, I don't know how far we'll get, honestly, with any of this. I might fail at the first one, but with this version, what we'll do is something more complicated. I'm thinking of, in this version, we won't have to use any screws at all. What we'll instead end up doing is have a inner form or box that's built with these 45-degree miters. I think miter is the right term. Someone correct me if you watch this and you know better, but essentially then we kind of have a box that comes apart, and then the way it's held together is through tension from the top. So the top plate that goes onto this box will have bolts running all the way through the outside form, through top form, and that's pressing down and holding it all together. At least that's the idea. We'll see how that works. If it might be, worse than even this option. But I'm hoping with this, we'll be able to reuse forms because things aren't drilled together and screwed together. So yeah, let's try that out. So I made a Lowe's run, and here's some of the hardware I've got. This is kind of for the more complicated version of things that I was talking about. Got some silicone just to help out, buckets to help with mixing and stuff, got a trowel, and then there's some other stuff that we have too, like this. It's always exciting to get a new tool. I've slowly been trying to grow my collection of Milwaukee ones, and I researched what the best starter tool for woodworking would be. I was between a jigsaw and a circular saw, and honestly, in hindsight, I think I should have gone for a circular saw. But that's just some foreshadowing for later in the video. Next, I got to drawing up the plans for the coaster form that I'm building out of the wood that I have here. I'm gonna do a little bit of a poor man's setup over here. We have an old shower liner laid down to collect any dust, hopefully. I think I'm gonna have it regardless, vacuum up anyway. It's not the best, but it's not a lot of cutting, so I hope I can just get away with it real fast. Make sure to have at least some PPE going on, but nothing crazy. All right, so I think this is a good one to get started on. We have the base block, you have the corner blocks right here. This worked out pretty well. We did get a little dust spillover, but I'll just vacuum it up. I tried a different settings right there. 0 was definitely the right one. I got a pretty jagged cut on the one where I didn't do that. I think I definitely got some measurements wrong while I was doing it. Okay, cool. So yeah, that'll hold those together just like that. And then that'll be the depth of the pour. So you can see this is a good simple one to get started on. We'll screw the base in through there. I'll try to use the flattest parts for it and don't really have to do anything except screed the concrete over this. But this kind of is the basic principle that could apply to something like a countertop. So I think it's a good place to start. I think the next part is clean some stuff up and then move on to putting that together. All right, so that's our form. Honestly, worse than I thought it would turn out. We've got decent gap between the wood. I think what I attribute that to is using a jigsaw versus something like a table saw or a circular saw, which I think would give you much straighter cuts. I always knew that was going to be the case when I bought the jigsaw, but I thought a jigsaw would be a good first place to start with woodworking tools. I alternated the sides I was putting the screws in because based on the thickness, I couldn't put a screw in here because it would hit this screw. Kind of alternate those around and put center screws in the longer sections to account for that. So I think what I'll do now is I will clean this up a little bit just by hand, and then I'll use the silicone to seal it up, and then that should be ready. Again, it doesn't look impressive, but it doesn't really need to be impressive. It just needs to be somewhat flat, and the height here, the 1/2 inch, I think that's what I did, will be the coaster's depth. Oh, I guess I should talk about the reason I picked this wood was because it has this treatment on top of it. I think it's primed. I think melamine would be the correct wood to pick for this solution, but I don't think this is melamine. I was looking for it, and this is what I found, and I was flustered at Lowe's. And then the other thing that I do recommend is I didn't start putting pilot holes in, but as I went through, I started putting bigger and bigger pilot holes in. Or I think I started with pilot holes, I just put a small one. And the pilot holes really helped out to drive the screws in. Without it, I was having a tough time because it's pretty dense wood. But with the pilot holes, it was awesome. I go ahead and start caulking in the gaps. This will help keep the concrete in, but also helps with the shape of the final concrete that is produced by rounding out the corner and the edges. It can be helpful in preventing chipping since concrete is fairly brittle. All right. I don't think I'm going to try to chase extreme perfection here. I got all the cracks sealed up. I think it's a good enough finish. Maybe I will chase a little bit of perfection right there now that I see it in the light. But yeah, I think that's looking good. I'll let it dry and then I'll go over it, clean up a little bit. You can see a lot of adhesive still there. And then we'll be ready to pour. I'll probably let this cure overnight. All right, it's another day. This is looking good, better. Just wiped it down. I got this little container. I got a mask. I got concrete in a bag to help control the dust. I'm gonna try pouring some now. This is what we've all been waiting for. It's time to pour the concrete. I pour directly into the center of the form and pour a little bit at a time, spreading it out towards the corners as I go. I use this massage gun with a plastic bag over it to agitate the concrete and get the air bubbles out, which helps improve the finish of the final concrete once it's set. So it's been a few days since the concrete's been curing. Admittedly, it's been a week. Kind of put the project on the back burner. I'm going to check it out now. It doesn't look great. So I think we'll say that this attempt was the first failure, and I'll try to learn from this and make a better form, better mold, better pour, all of that stuff. And I think I'll talk through some of the mistakes that I made and how I want to improve them in the next version and see if that actual improvement happens or not. So here we have it. The first thing is it's not very level as a pour. One of the things that I've seen is the concrete I use had these big pebbles in it for which add, structure and rigidity to the concrete. So that's good, but I think for my application, I don't need that much structure and rigidity, right? And because of that, some of the leveling's off. Some of it is my own fault. I don't think I mixed enough concrete. And then with as it cured, it probably lost some of that. I did buy a sander for this project, so I'm gonna try that out on all sides. But I think that's the least of my problems. I think the second problem is I was hoping for something being like such a small form, releasing it wouldn't be such an issue. So I just flip it over and hit it a few times. That would be that, and it would come out. But it's not looking that easy. So I'm gonna try to get this out of the form next. And we might have to take some of these screws out, or I might just try to hammer it a bunch of times. So we'll just see how that goes. Oh no. Oh no. Okay, so that was a failure. I've always read about how brittle concrete is. I didn't think tapping with a hammer would absolutely crack the bejesus out of it. Not great, but again, like I said, another thing I'll learn from that. It was easy to release from the mold once I took out this one piece. Once I took out this one piece, I kind of pried it open. It would be nice for me not to have to take out pieces, unscrew, but that's kind of what I talked about at the start of the video, where if there was a way to kind of keep this rigid without screwing things in, so it was a very removable mold versus something that's being held together with screws, that would be great. That being said, I'm going to trash all of this, dispose of it properly, but I think the one big piece that did survive, I will still continue with this just to learn sanding concrete and stuff, and then I want to do another pour using the same mold. Maybe I'll oil it up this time to make releasing easier. I will have to redo some of the caulking on the side, but most of it seems fine. Clean this up as well, and then we'll do another pour. Cool, so I'm gonna use that, head outdoors, put on a mask. 3M quality, I think, is what everyone said should be fine. And then try sanding down some of the bigger pieces of that concrete just to get some experience before we do our next round of pouring this out. Not really a lot there. I mean, I was struggling. I guess what I learned is this is what came out of the form as, a lot smoother, and this is what the back looks like, right? So the front, after sanding, got pretty rough. Took that finish off, which I think I prefer the smoother finish. I don't want to use the sander on the front. And then on the back, it was able to take off some of these like big irregularities from the pebbles, so I was able to grind some of the pebbles down. But overall, it was also difficult because this wasn't clamped down. It was moving around a lot, and as I was grinding kind of the edges, I was trying to get the edges smooth too, just to try that out, and those would break apart pretty easily, so I don't want to be doing that. So yeah, just gotta let's evaluate all the mistakes I made and do it better next time. All right, so here are the lessons that I learned while doing this first part. First is improperly securing the wood while cutting. It was just on the table. I think clamping it down better would have really given me some more support and it would have helped. The next one is using the jigsaw freehand versus using a guide with it. You could see that in the wavy way that the wood came out after it was cut. And so I think I just need to measure more and cut things out using those measurements versus freehanding it. I think cutting indoors is a bad idea. I was getting a lot of dust everywhere, and I think it was just hot and it was stressing me out being in there, so it was just a poor workspace. The concrete mix did have a lot of larger rocks in it. I understand the reason for them is to give more strength, but I might experiment with sifting out those rocks and just try another form like that. The concrete hammering was a really bad idea. That shattered it into a bunch of pieces. I think it would have been probably fine, so we'll see that again in the next version. The form release required unscrewing, which I was hoping to avoid, but that might just be the case for this first version and the second version, and if we build one that comes apart and is held together without screws, that might be better. I definitely got the measurements incorrect for the form that I built. So, okay, let's talk about how we'll improve these. For most of these, I think clamping things down and measuring more is just a better idea, so I'll be better about that. For a better workspace, I did buy a sawhorse type deal that I think I can work outside on, which will make things better, and I can clamp things down on that, use that as my main workspace. We're gonna not do any concrete hammering. We're gonna experiment with sifting on the concrete. That might be a bad idea, but I think it's fine. Again, just trying to learn stuff here. And then form release, we're gonna try oiling the form before pouring the concrete in. All right, let's try this all over again. Start with a new workspace.
All right, I just wanted to give a shout out to all my fans. Kelsey, I love you.
I measured a ton of times, made sure that everything was set up correctly. I tried out a few different clamping formations and I thought this one worked best. I think these cuts turned out a lot better and the measurements look right as well. Here I'm sifting through the concrete to get rid of the larger stones and particles in it, hoping to get a smoother final pour of concrete in. I started getting the form ready with some clamps and was going to use the drill to put in some screws, but at some point decided that I'm just going to go all out and not use the wood screws and just use the clamps to hold it together and see how that turns out instead, since I didn't have much luck with the screws before. I give this the same caulking treatment that I did before, and this time I kind of struggled with it because of reusing the same caulk tube that I had, but I eventually struggled my way through it. And then I covered it up to let it rest for a while until the caulk cured. I came back with the cooking oil, like I promised, and I started oiling up the form really liberally, made sure that it was nice and soaked in. Started mixing in the concrete, doing the same thing, pouring in the center, pushing out to the edges. I think even in this iteration, the concrete was too wet. And I start hammering it to get some of those bubbles out and start agitating it. You can see it here, hopefully, if you look closely. You can see the air bubbles releasing as I hammer it. Then I give it the same massage gun treatment that I did before. Here you can really see that this is too liquidy in my opinion, and I think this causes some of the issues that come up. But here's what it looks like after it's set, after a few days. I think it looked great at this point. It didn't have those giant stones in it that we first saw when we pulled the form out. I slowly peel apart the form and very gently take the concrete out. And I thought it looked fantastic at this point. It is a little lopsided on one side, but hey, what can you do? So to prove to myself that the form I built is reusable, I go ahead and clean off the concrete and the caulk. And then I go ahead and do the same thing all over again, reusing the same pieces, clamping it back together. This time I try to level it a little bit using just this level that I bought. I used some paper towels to prop it up and did manage to get it level. And then I moved to the same caulking process that we've seen a few times now. It was an even bigger struggle this time, but we got through it. I sealed off the edges, and then I poured another coaster of concrete in it as well. Here's a few angles of what the coaster looks like at this point. I'm really satisfied with that. It looks great. The only thing for me was that it's completely unprotected. It's just raw concrete, and my previous experience has taught me that this is going to crumble away over time if it's not protected at all. So I got this clear coat spray can thing off of Amazon, and I decided to test it out on one of the broken pieces from earlier. I really liked the look of it, so I thought I'd go ahead and try it out on the real piece. So I gave it a coat, checked out what it looked like. I thought it needed some more. And of course, being me, I went overboard and sprayed it with too many coats, too many times. And I really did not like the finish at this point. It's way too shiny, it's too gloppy, it's just not there. But luckily I did have the sander, and I think this is the best use of the sander in this project so far. It was really useful to get that clear coat, kind of peel it back a little bit, and I gave the same treatment to the edges. Then I came back and gave the face a little bit more the sander until I was fully satisfied with it. At the end of it, I thought it looked fantastic. This is exactly what I had in my mind when I started this out. In fact, this even is a little bit more shiny, but I think over time on my desk, as I've been using it, this was right after, but over time as I've been using it, it's gotten even better. And I'm really happy with it. So I'm pretty happy with that result. It's my first time pouring something at that small of a scale for concrete, and I've only poured concrete once before. It's not perfect. There were imperfections, especially with, I think the biggest imperfection with the slope of the coaster that we ended up with. But I learned a lot and made some mistakes. Hopefully you learned a little bit too. I don't think I need to do the coaster again personally. I think I'm ready to do the flower pot. I might have to delay that for a bit because I think I need to get new tools, because I think I'll be skipping this middle design since we moved away from screws here. I think think I'll go straight for this kind of form that clamps together because we had success with it making the coaster. I think I'm gonna need something like a circular saw or a miter to be able to actually cut correctly and join everything together. Apart from that, I think one of the mistakes I made was concrete itself was a little too watery. So it seemed like it was level because the water would rise and that looks level, but I wasn't putting enough concrete in the form because of that. Again, it was at small scale and it was just one-sided, so that could be part of it too. But I think to get a form that performs well and is square, I might need better tools for it. So that's my plan going forward. I might have to wait a little bit to do that, but I'll take all the stuff I learned from that and roll it forward into that. Thanks for watching.